Hi everyone, Nubkeks here, and I am sorry that this video has been late coming out. I wasn't really happy with it, so I kind of took some time to redo it, so I hope you'll enjoy it. But in today's video, we're looking at Sylvanas. She is the final boss of the Sanctum of Domination, the final boss of 9.1. She could well be the defining boss of Shadowlands as well, right? Kind of like Jaina was in BFA, kind of the boss that stands out the most, the boss with the most story, the most lore that we have known about literally for years, and I've well, in Sylvanas' case, been building up to actually fighting, actually taking her down for years as well. So for this fight, there's actually three main phases, and I didn't personally get to see them all, so the structure of this video is a little bit different. I'll show you my footage for phase 1, and then I'll show you some other footage for phase 2 and phase 3, and obviously I'll credit those when we get to them. You can go and check out the original footage too. Alright then, so for phase 1, in my opinion, there's actually only one really difficult mechanic here in phase 1 on heroic difficulty, which are the domination arrows, these arrows that chain you to them, and we'll come to those in just a minute. First of all, as you'll no doubt see from the footage, Sylvanas, she's been watching anime. She is dashing all over the place, doing all this really fancy looking stuff. What's going on? Well, this is her Windrunner mechanic, and the way it works, I guess the easiest way to think about it is as if her body stays where she was already standing, but then her Banshee form is flying around and firing off all these abilities. That's the easiest way to think about it, because it's how it works effectively, is her hitbox stays where she is, but her character model is flying all over the place and shooting out all these barrages of arrows, throwing out shadow daggers, all that sort of stuff. Looks visually cool. It's a bit overwhelming the first time you see it for sure. But, I mean, you can just keep attacking her where she was stood, and it works just the same. As one of the players while we were doing this set as well, Sylvanas likes drawing fun patterns on the floor, right? Her arrow barrages that she throws out, there's a whole bunch of different patterns you can have. You can have, like, just this wide band that stretches across the area, like 3 across of arrows you've got to get out of. She can do random patterns. She can draw sort of flower patterns on the floor. She's got lots of different things she can do. You just need to dodge those. But the big mechanic of this phase are the domination chains, right? The domination arrows. With this one, she fires out a bunch of very big swirlies, and then a random selection of these, it seems like, will leave an arrow behind in the floor. The arrow will then chain the closest player to it after a couple of seconds. What this chain does, it keeps stacking a higher and higher dot on you. It keeps pulling you to the arrow with a stronger and stronger pull for each stack. And then one thing that was actually quite bugged when we were doing this testing here is that it's supposed to kill you if you ever get pulled within 4 yards of the arrow. There's supposed to be a circle around it, which does an ability called Calamity, which is effectively a one-shot. That showed up in some of the footage and some of the pulls, and then it didn't in other ones. And you could kind of break the chain pulls and stuff like that with, you know, things that freed you from roots, which is permanently free you. So there's a few bugs there, but the idea is that you need to fight against these chains, you need to fight against these arrows, and the raid needs to work together to kill these as quickly as possible. Like, so for a melee player, for example, if there's a 4-yard range AoE around the arrow that instantly kills you and you're being pulled into it, pretty hard then to kill your own arrow. But you can easily run over to someone else's arrow and kill that arrow. And of course, because you can do your full rotation while moving as melee, you're actually very, very good at that. So it's really all about working together and killing these chained arrows quickly. That's where we struggled. Our group never quite got to grips with it in the hour or so that we had to test. So we never got through P1. We'd have people die to arrows pretty much every single time. One interesting thing as well, which you can kind of YOLO on Heroic, but will be more important on Mythic, is that when she's doing her Windrunner attacks, she's constantly firing out these barbed arrows, which apply a permanent bleed onto you that just keeps stacking and stacking and stacking. Now, you do remove it, though, whenever you get chained by a domination arrow. So what this essentially means is that you can't just have, let's say, the melee players always get chained, and then the ranged just stay turreted and casting up, and they never get pulled by the chains. You can't do that, because the stacks of barbed arrow will get too high. So you have to constantly rotate people to remove the bleeds. You know, whenever you get like 3 or so stacks, you want to make sure that you get chained to get rid of that bleed, that sort of thing. So that is something to watch out for. And then a fun little throwback for me as well, Wailing Arrow is a sort of a tank ability that Sylvanas has, where she will shoot this massive explosion arrow at the current tank they get to run it out. So they need to run it really far away, and it does damage based on how close it is to the group. And this actually does hit pretty hard, so you have to watch out for that. And then pretty much finally, you know, there's Shadow Daggers, which is just a dot that has to be healed on players, a fairly big dot. She does a Veil of Darkness, which is a big shadowy thing around her. Don't stand in the big shadowy thing, it's bad. She also does like a tank mechanic where she smacks the tank as she builds up stacks on herself with her Heartseeker. Pretty standard stuff. For the intermission then, we're going to be checking out some footage from Automatic Jack, and also thanks to Wowhead for sharing this as well. When you go into the intermission, every single player in the raid gets chained by a domination arrow. So in a 20-person mythic raid, for example, there's going to be 20 domination arrows locking everyone down. At the same time, Sylvanas herself is basically immune to damage. She'll just be teleporting around the edge of the area and chain casting this ability called Rive, which is essentially just it's like a single massacre line from the Denathras encounter, if you've seen that. I imagine this is way harder on Mythic. On Heroic, it's not too bad. You know, don't stand in the line, it will one-shot you. So on Heroic difficulty, I think this phase is definitely going to be a little bit tricky, but you can certainly YOLO it. There's no question you can YOLO it down. On Mythic, it could be quite interesting. You might have to have assigned zones for players to actually deal with this. So for example, you could have, let's say, you know, melee group 1 in the front left, melee group 2 in the front right, and then you could have the ranged and the healers spread along the back, and then you would have like the front left melee group come and help the back left ranged, the front right melee group go help the back right ranged, and then the ranged would help break out the melee, and then each melee group would help the other melee group, because obviously it's a little bit difficult helping each other because you can't go near your own chain. So you might have to have sort of plans like that. It could be kind of interesting. For phase 2, we're going to check out some footage from Kalamazi. So again, huge shout out to Kalamazi, does loads of Warlock content. Jack, Automatic Jack, does loads of Priest content. So 2 great content creators for you guys to check out here already. But in phase 2, basically these gigantic chains are formed, presumably in a cutscene that is not yet implemented, between the top of Erebos and the top of Torghast, where you're fighting. So Sylvanas is basically racing across these chains, the jailer's racing across these chains to get to Erebos to, I don't know, kill the Arbiter, do something bad, and we are kind of racing to catch up. This phase is going to play something like an escort quest as well, because Thrall and Jaina are going to be here and they're going to be helping us, right? As you can see, these chains are very, very, very big, and we cannot get across them very easily. Well, Thrall can make bridges out of earth, and Jaina can make bridges out of ice, so you have to protect them as they sort of build a path for you across these chains. Sylvanas herself in this phase is very interesting. She's going to be alternating between her regular form and her Banshee form. When she's in her Banshee form, she's effectively immune to damage, and she's just going to be flying around, sort of like an artillery platform, right? Just blasting you with abilities. So for example, her Haunting Wave attack is going to save out these sort of waves of Banshee energy, this dark energy. If it hits you, I think it does a dot, but more importantly, it does a knockback. And hey, you know, if you're trying to run across a little ice bridge and you get hit by a knockback, you're going to have a pretty bad time, right? So it's important to dodge these abilities. In her human form, her abilities are actually pretty limited, but you are able to get some damage on her during this phase. The main thing that she does, though, is an ability called Rune. And if she finishes the cast of Rune, it effectively wipes the raid. So I think that what this is intended to do is just, you know, you have to be keeping up. You have to be making quick enough progress across this bridge to reach her on time to interrupt this ability. I think that's effectively how this is going to work. At the same time as well, then, there's also a whole bunch of different ad types that can spawn in. You've got big ads that smack the tank. It looks like there's some ads that need to be kited around, ads that need to be kicked. You've got a summoner ad that summons in orbs that empower nearby ads, so they need to be targeted down very, very quickly, that sort of thing. So yeah, there's going to be a whole bunch of ads and ad control during this phase as well. Finally then, let's check out footage from Lucid9797 from the guild Nascent, who was able to actually, in fact, one of the only people to stream some of phase 3. So we'll actually see some of the transition here as they come to the end of P2 and go through into phase 3. But this is the final showdown on the top of Erebos against Sylvanas, and there's a whole bunch of crazy shit going on. So first and foremost, the jailer is over there. He's trying to channel at the Arbiter. Thrall, Jaina, and Bolvar are fighting Anduin in the center in front of the Arbiter. You can't go down there except for the very, very, very end as sort of a last resort because Anduin will kill you very quickly. So it's kind of like when you've run out of outside platforms, you might go into the middle. But the main thing that you're doing in this phase is you're fighting Sylvanas across these four quite small, quite tiny platforms around the edge. The fun thing about this is they have jump pads around the edge of them, so you can actually jump to the other platforms using these jump pads, right? So you can actually escape around, which is pretty cool. And during this phase, she has a whole bunch of abilities that are all based around using the space that you have and running out of space. So her Bane arrows, for example, she'll launch a volley of these Bane arrows, which leave these permanent pools on the ground. What do they do? Well, if you step on a pool, it's going to put this really nasty dot back on you. You can get dispelled, and then it drops that pool back on the ground. Now, she actually spreads these around all of the platforms from the very start of the phase. So on Heroic, you might just YOLO it. On Mythic, I think it's looking quite possible that you will actually have to send players out to the other platforms to grab those pools and bring them back to the platform that you're currently on. On top of this, she's still going to be doing her Wailing Arrow stuff, so targeting the tank with the Explosion Arrow, so they have to drop that far away, probably jumping onto another platform. She'll still be able to do her Veil of Darkness ability, which is the big AoE around her to get out of. And then she'll also do Banshee's Fury, which is this AoE around each individual player. So there's going to be lots of spreading, lots of stacking, lots of moving between platforms to avoid things. And then the big thing that she does about every 1 minute is Raise, where she fires a gigantic death-empowered arrow, which just completely annihilates one of the platforms, right? It just essentially kills you within seconds if you're in that on that platform. It destroys the jump pads, so you can't get off. So essentially, I think the idea is going to be that you're going to have to do 1 minute on each of these platforms. So it's going to be harder and harder and harder. You're going to have to try to stack up these pools on the platform out on the side so they're not in your way. You're going to have to keep doing your spread mechanics in the platform. You might have to be jumping off the platform and then back again to dodge certain mechanics as well. And then every 1 minute, she's going to permanently destroy a platform, which will then also get rid of any of those Bane Arrow pools you left there. And you're just going to keep running out of space. You know, the last platform is going to be rough. There's probably going to be extra Bane Arrow pools there. There is nowhere to escape to. I guess you could jump into the middle of the platform where Anduin is and then jump back really fast in an emergency. But it's going to be pretty tight. It's going to be pretty rough. And once all the platforms are down, I don't know, like maybe you can do an extra % or 2 of damage to Sylvanas by jumping to the middle before Anduin finishes you off. Not really sure. Obviously, no one got that far. But it is the sort of race against time. It's very reminiscent, actually, of, I think, Sire Denathrius Phase 3, where you're running out of space every time he does the Ravage. I think it's going to be very, very like that. And that was a great Phase 3. People loved it, loved that fight. I think this fight does draw a lot from that. So there you go, guys. That was Sylvanas Windrunner, the final boss of Sanctum of Domination. This is her on Heroic difficulty. Of course, it's going to be a lot harder on Mythic. We'll see what that's like. They usually don't do any Mythic testing of the final boss. That is left until it actually goes live in the game, and then players have to see it for the first time when they actually get there on live servers, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I guess check out the Race to World first for that. But in terms of Heroic, I think this is a great boss. I'm really liking what they've done with Sylvanas. Like I said just in the last part there on Phase 3, I think this is an awful lot like Sire Denathrius. You have Phase 1, which isn't too hard. You know, you've got the one big dangerous mechanic to deal with, which really are those domination arrows, breaking the chains, making sure players are free as quickly as possible. That's the one dangerous thing. And then she's doing a lot of stuff that looks visually really cool. She's flipping all over the place, doing all of her anime stuff, but it's not really all that dangerous. So that's sort of Phase 1. Phase 2 then is entirely different. It's a completely different sort of phase where you're going across these chains, you're controlling all the ads, just moving across. I just love the location of this, really. I think it's so cool, right? This gigantic chain stretching between these two towers, and you're sort of slowly making your way across it. I just love the sense of scale, the sense of epicness. I think it's pretty awesome. And then Phase 3 is the real meat and potatoes of the fight, right? The real meat and potatoes where you looks like you're going to have 4 minutes to kill the boss. Basically, this 4-minute burn with stuff getting harder and harder and harder. Lots of movement, lots of area control happening. You really have to plan around all of her abilities. The great thing is that it looks like everything, at least on Heroic, looks to be on a pretty strict timer. So you know exactly what's going to happen. You can plan around it. Again, it's Denathrius P3, just like P2. It's kind of like Denathrius P2, lots of movement, lots of ad control. And then it's just, yeah, that 1v1, fight the boss, just you as your raid team versus Sylvanas. just, yeah, 1v1 or 20v1, whatever it happens to be. Just focus her down, take her down, this big burn, every bit of damage counts, loads of mechanics. Yeah, I think it's great. In terms of what specs might be good here, it's obviously hard to say, but at a quick guess, obviously execute, single target execute damage is going to be really important. Same with Sergeant Athreus. That's going to be really, really important to actually kill the boss at the end, which is going to be the hardest part and the most important part. At the same time, you know, AoE damage is going to be very important and will give you the highest damage meter standing at the end of the fight, because it's going to get you through P1 with the arrows and P2 with all the different adds. You know, realistically speaking, you're going to want both sort of damage profiles, I think, is going to be the way to go. In terms of specs, which might be good, I mean, Arcane Mage could be a bit of a dark horse here, having really good single target damage, really good execute damage as well, and also bringing good AoE. I think with their same legendary that lets them do execute, boost their AoE damage too. So that actually could be a pretty good call here. That could be pretty nice. They can also do AoE while moving, which really helps with the chains too. I say Balance Druid obviously seems pretty damn strong here. They're going to be great for that AoE in P1 and P2. And then in P3, well, Convoke the Spirits. If it is a 4-minute phase, you're going to get 3 casts of Convoke the Spirits off. So that's not too bad either. That could be pretty strong. I played Shadow Priest during my testing on this fight, and obviously, again, much like Sergeant Athreus, not going to be super useful in P1 or P2, but Shadow Priest with their single target damage is going to be extremely good for phase 3, for the final phase. And yeah, I guess another dark horse spec for this might be the Assassination Rogue, right? Incredible single target damage, great execute damage as well, so great for P3. And then they are a melee spec, which means that they can actually be, you know, running around doing pretty good ad control. They can do, you know, decent damage to the arrows while moving, though obviously AoE is not really their forte, but that could be a dark horse spec, one to watch out for. But yeah, let me know what you think. What stands out to you as being particularly good? I'd be curious to hear. And even more importantly, let me know, are you impressed by the fight? Does it look cool? Are you hyped to finally fight Sylvanas? Do you want to kill her? I do. I hope that she dies at the end. I don't want no redemption story shit. I want her to just die. Let's just be done with it. Bam, just defeated, dead. She could be a little bit sad, a bit sorry. That's fair enough. I'd be shocked if they didn't do that. But yeah. Goodbye, Sylvanas. That's what I want to see. Let me know what you think. Thanks, everyone, for watching. I hope you had a good one, and I will see you all next time. Patch 9.1 is just around the corner now. Bye-bye.